Good afternoon, everyone, and I'd like to welcome you and call to order our special council meeting for Monday, November the 20th. I would like to acknowledge that I am an ally of Indigenous peoples. The township of Lucan Biddulph is located on the treaty and the traditional territory and ancestral lands of many Indigenous peoples and is covered by several Upper Canada treaties. We recognize and celebrate the contributions of Indigenous communities in our shared cultural heritage. Lucan Biddulph is now home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples and communities that have a unique relationship with the land and its resources and continue to shape the history and economy of the township. We recognize the unique role Indigenous communities have in the development of our communities. The contributions from Indigenous communities ensure the sharing of unique perspectives and traditional knowledge. The township recognizes the importance of consulting with our Indigenous neighbors and communities in an effort to build constructive, cooperative relationships through meaningful engagement and to inform our decision-making and build partnerships. We acknowledge historic and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples endure in Canada, and we affirm our commitment to honoring Indigenous voices, nations, and cultures, and to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none, we do not have to go into closed session. So we'll just go right into the staff presentations. And Catherine, I'm going to turn it over to you to begin the discussion on our 2024 capital budget planning.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So tonight we're gonna talk through all the different ideas we have for the capital budget for next year. So I want to thank you for submitting any ideas or suggestions that you had. You will see some of them included in the presentation. Some we may not see because they're maybe more operational, and they'll come up when we talk about the operating budget later on, not today. There are two staff reports included in the agenda, and we'll touch on those ones when we get to them in the presentation. So, before we can talk about capital projects, I wanted just to remind you of the different sources of our funding. Of course, we always look for the different grants that we have, and the one including would be the Canada Community Building Fund, or CCBF. That's what used to be called the gas tax. We don't know the number for 2024 at this time. They are revamping those agreements, and we're just waiting to see what that looks like. The OCIF, or Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, those amounts usually get announced in December, but our minimum will be at least 301,000 because it's within 15% of the prior year is what they go with. So we have that to work with. And both the CCBF and OCIF can be banked or held for up to 5 funding years. So you don't have to use them all for 2024, and they gain interest to go towards that as well in our bank accounts. So keep that in mind as well. And then there's other government grants. You can see we're successful with some, and other opportunities we're looking for. We'll talk through that. And then we look if there's any donations that can go towards any projects. And then we have a reserve and reserve funds. And I provided a summary sheet to each of you to kind of have handy, kind of put things in perspective as we go through the discussion with all the different projects. And then we don't have, if at the end of the day, if there's nothing, we want to do a project, we look at possible loans to fund those. Talking about loans, we do have some loans in place. So ones are a couple of new ones that we got this year, but the payments will start in 2024. You can see there, and then in upcoming, once the Lucan Soccer Complex is complete, then we'll be applying for the last part of that loan that we had. We have construction loan, like a financing agreement with IO already. We just have to finalize that loan once that project is done. Okay. So we'll get to the projects. So in our kind of our general admin area, we had some projects that we're still working on. Mainly their HR payroll software that's in conjunction with the county. And there's kind of had a pause, but that's ongoing, and our target go live will be mid-April of next year. We still plan to do something with a band shell in Market Street Park. That project didn't have time to do that this year, but we'll look at that in 2024. And then any questions about that, but I'll move on.
Do you want to do questions as they go along, or do you?
Probably we should
Okay,
just
yep.
jump on it with it being 6 or 7 pages, maybe.
Okay.
Then revert back.
Yep.
Or if that's all right with you.
No, that's fine.
Just so the band shell, is that money sitting there waiting to be used this year if it would have been?
Yeah, it's
It-
part of our reserves.
It part of the reserves. It would come out.
It'll come out of the building reserve,
Gotcha. Okay.
but that
Earmark for that.
nothing's finalized with that project, so it's just be worked on next year.
Sorry, has there been any money spent on that? None at all, like no design money or anything?
We had a consultant kind of do a design for an RFP or request for proposals, and that's kind of where it's sitting at right now.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, the next is about our downtown and streetscape improvements. I'm gonna pass it over to Jeff Little to talk about that.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, so I asked Catherine, I'd like to make a couple of comments, because you'll see as one of the ideas for the downtown area is the downtown streetlights. Looking at upgrading them to a standard that is promotes the downtown. And I just wanted to point out, we put down $250,000. But for the light standards themselves would probably be in the neighborhood of 90 to 100,000. In the downtown area, our electrical service is not adequate, and it needs to be replaced. So I wouldn't recommend putting up new streetlights if we had to rip everything up and put new electrical service down through the downtown. So the large portion of that is redoing the electrical conduit and sidewalks in the downtown area. So I just wanted council to be aware of why that number was so high.
Okay,
Okay.
so the 250, you say the majority of that is to upgrade or change, do whatever to the
To
electrical
the
service.
electrical that services the streetlights, correct?
And then the posts, the
Yeah.
light posts are on top of that.
Are on top of so it'd be, the total would be 250. About 100 of it would be towards the streetlights themselves, and the 150 would be for the conduit and the upgrading of the electrical service. Okay.
Any other discussion on that one at this point? Yeah, Jaden. Counselor Hodgins.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, for you. What would the limits of that project be? Do we know, this is kind of the start and finish? Is it confined to just the downtown area, or is that still to be determined?
Yeah, and through the chair, I maybe ask Lisa, but my understanding it's from William up to Water.
And just add a point to that, as you can see, so some of that for funding wise could be, depending on what's included in the project, we could use some of their construction reserve or our other, like our gas tax. But also I think we'll have to consider when we go through, if we want to do this kind of project, is to up our contribution to that streetscape or what did I call it? Streetscape improvements reserve that we started on 2023, but we want to show some commitment to that and see what can be done there when we'll talk about the operating budget, but I think we need to put some money into downtown before we lose it. And then there was another point there about purchasing of land in the downtown. There was some comments about that, some suggestions. So as opportunities arise, those will come up in closed council sessions. But if we want to We don't know the price tag and all that kind of thing, but we could start saving some money towards all of those kinds of projects with the downtown.
Yeah, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Jeff, just will you be considering maybe by the museum, with it being a tourist spot, potentially for even having conduit or piping for a couple parking spots for future EV potential charging stations in the future when it makes sense?
I'm sorry. I had my speaker still on. I'll be honest, Madam Mayor, I'll be honest, I haven't looked that far in the future, to be honest. So it would have to be, I'd have to look at what would be needed and what kind of hydro is available to the downtown. The upgrades themselves, that's the problem we have, is we have a real issue with the amount of hydro that we've got going through down there. So I think I can't really give you a yes or a no on that, because I don't know the specifications that I'm dealing with on the downtown area.
Yeah, and I guess and again, I want to stress that just if it makes sense to put the infrastructure in there, just again, conduit and the wiring, that I'm not suggesting we put up a charging station there and take up a parking spot for a future vehicle there, but to have it there when it makes, to have the infrastructure there, well, it's all ripped up potentially, but if we don't have the electricity there, it's non-discussion. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I should say that it's not that we can't get the hydro there. It's just how much do we want to invest in getting the hydro to the main street? Would it be better to be, in a parking area or something along those lines? So yeah, I think there's planning to go into it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So moving along, we have an equipment schedule that we maintain, and there's some projects in there that from Public Works and Parks and Rec, so I'll pass it off to them.
Thank you, Catherine. So the carryover projects for Public Works is we did have a snowplow on deck for this year. The plan always was for the second half of the year to get that tender out. It just has not happened. I want to look at bringing a report to council on upgrading that standard plow truck to what we call a roll-off truck, which has you can put multiple units on the back of it. So you can have a dump truck, you can have a sanding unit. But what I'm looking at in particular, bringing a report to council for, is we could actually truck our own green waste. We would be able to put our own waste, our own bins at the shops or wherever we want it. We could put bins anywhere, and then our own staff could then transport that back and forth to try recycling or to wherever we want to take that green waste. So it's a pretty simple report. We'll look at the costs that are associated with the trucking for 2023, and then we'll look at that. The upgrade is about $100,000. So it's not a small upgrade for the truck, but it certainly gives us a lot of versatility, and there's a chance there that we actually can provide a better service for what we're getting there. So I plan to bring that report forward, and then we'll go from there on the replacement on the Western Star. So in the number there, you'll see 410. That's roughly what a replacement value is, what we have now. So a replacement value on a roll-off truck would be somewhere around $500,000 to $550,000.
Madam Mayor.
And the second one is the grader. And I think we're aware of this because we did have that engine go out on the grader, and the plan was to spend the money on the fix, but to promote replacement of the grader for 2 years out. We're looking at about a 1 year lead time. Now, I'm still looking into that. We're thinking that, the economy has changed a little bit since we talked about that in the spring. But the idea is not to have that grader come in till 2025. So even though we may have to approve it for 2024 and send it out for tender, the idea then is have the delivery date for 2025. Ideally, it would be the spring so we could have it for spring grading, in 2025.
Questions on that, Councillor Regan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Jeff, with the the roll-off truck, which is like a multi-purpose truck, like the cost of that, is there any special equipment you need for that when you're changing out? Like when you're changing it from one type of vehicle to the next, or is that all part of the deal or?
Yeah, and through the mayor, yeah, so that is part of the whole process. So we would order that truck to come with different basically different boxes, different utility boxes for the back. And then as we own that truck, if there was other utility boxes we wanted to add to it, such as a water truck or a water tank could be added to it. I mean, the sky's the limit. We could look at a flatbed, so we could use it for picking up equipment, rollers, that sort of thing, and transporting it. Not saying that's what we will, but down the road it gives us the option. Right now, I'm looking at the option for a bin program that we use at the yards.
Okay, sorry, and just not to be too specific with it, but it's just so right now we've got that hoist that moves the plows onto it and takes them on and off, right? Like out at the shop, right? So is that, I'm just saying with this truck, is there any other special equipment you need with that to change those out? I just,
Yeah, no,
because
the
I'm
truck.
just envisioning these things being
Yeah.
changed out, so.
Yep, no, it's a good question. So through the mayor, no, the truck comes as a unit itself.
Okay.
So it doesn't need any additional investment at the shop. It can be used anywhere. It travels as a unit. It's just that the back end then can be taken off and a different one put on.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Jeff.
Anything else on the carryover projects? Okay.
For Parks and Recreation, we have a 1-ton pickup truck due to replaced. It's our F-250. It's a 2015. It's also our plow truck for the parking lot at the arena. It's roughly got 88,000 kilometers on it, so. Next up, an additional floor scrubber for that new addition. It's been noted that one floor scrubber is very hard to keep up with the cleaning of the new facility. So the next item is a hitch mount salter, again for the parking lot. We went with a hitch mount because we feel that would be a good enough size for what we have to do. And then the last item is a top dresser. Again, with the investment we've had in our sports fields, for the long-term growth of it. The dollar amount on a top dresser though is $32,500. That is new. Staff was looking into purchasing the equipment or what the possibility of to rent or actually contract out the work.
Okay, thanks for that, Jeff. Questions on those ones? I guess I'll ask the question about the pickup truck since I know nothing about replacement of trucks, and I would probably just, is that like, does it have to be replaced? Like, or is it just because it's in our asset management plan that it's ready to be replaced?
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. At this time, staff does feel we could continue with the truck, but it is in the schedule for replacement. That's why I noted the 88,000 kilometers. It's still a good running truck.
Have we had to invest anything into it lately?
This current year in the commercial safety, brakes were done. It was a rough estimate of around $5,500 that was spent on it this year for its safety.
Great, thanks.
Can I just, sorry, Madam Mayor, sorry, can I just ask about the floor scrubber? This is just like a cleaning machine, a second cleaning machine for the community center for the floors? Is that what we're looking at?
Yes, through the mayor. It'd be a second floor scrubber. We have one now, and this would be an additional one. This one is a bit bigger to help with the bigger areas to help speed up.
Okay.
But right now, if one went down,
Oh, all right.
it would be a nightmare to try to keep up.
All right, no, I was just gonna, thank you. I was just wondering if for the second one, if you have two staff operating, do they operated at the same time? This is just a backup? Or this would be a primary one and the one you have now would be the backup?
Through the mayor. Essentially with our cleaning company, they're using our equipment. That was part of the tender that they were successful on. So they might be using one and now we'd have the opportunity to use the second one at the same time.
Okay. Thank you for that information. Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Jeff.
Anything else on the Parks and Recreation equipment list? Okay.
Okay, so we'll move on to, we have the next two sections. We have the Public Works, roads construction, and we also, then we have followed by Parks and Rec. And you, as you looked, if you previewed or looked out ahead, you see there's lots of projects listed. Some we'll talk through saying these are things we need to do, and there's things that we would like to do, but nothing has to, not saying nothing, but there's opportunity to spread these out if they push them into another year, because you don't want to overload too many projects or the chance might not get done, but we have to kind of weigh off what we need to do, what we'd like to do, and what could possibly put off in the future. So I just wanted to preface that before we started talking.
Thank you, Catherine. We'll start with the carryover projects for Public Works. The first one is the Roman Line. The Roman Line project was a resurfacing, was a full depth resurfacing of the Roman Line from Richmond Street north to just past the cemetery limits. There's a section in it that is paved. It's in pretty rough shape. The reason it's a carryover is this year, when we reviewed it, we actually installed drainage in the road. And we would rather have that drainage set up for a year before going in and paving it. So we held off on the Roman Line paving. So that's the reason why we're carrying it over. The Fallon Drive was another paving project, and it was the extension of the pavement from basically where Heenan Court, it just the pavement ends just past the industrial park at Heenan Court. And so we are going to extend the pavement to the new Donaldson, to the wastewater treatment plant, the new Donaldson plant that's down the road. It's about 180 meters of pavement. The Donaldson project is still being built, so there's no sense putting down new pavement while construction's still going on. So their time frame is to finish their building in 2024. So basically we're carrying that project like it was explained last year on it. The traffic control measures, we had this in a capital project to look at installing some traffic control measures like humps or speed bumps, signage, line painting, that sort of thing. Do some projects through a couple of reports that came through council. It was decided to go ahead with that about halfway through the year, and we just never got to that point where to get those installed. So that's a carryover project. The plan is to get that going in the spring, pick 2 to 3 spots in Lucan and see what kind of measures we can put in place. I did investigate what other municipalities have done in that case. They're recommending try a couple of the areas that can be removed during the winter and see how the neighborhoods like the traffic controlling measures in place. And if it is deemed that it's working and there's positive feedback, take them out and put in proper paved measures, so that you're not taking in and out every year. What they're finding is because you got to drill into the pavement, you're kind of putting a bit of a damaging holes, and then going in and out, it seems to wear the pavement. So what I've heard is find out if you like them. If they work, put them in permanent with the asphalt. So that's still on board as a carryover. And then the other carryover project obviously is the extension of the sidewalks across the road on Main Street. Although we've got the concrete in. Next year, we hope to have the paving. We're going to pave the shoulder all the way out to the commercial center, and we'll add streetlights and signage and that sort of thing to finish that project. So that's also a carryover project from last year. So before I go on to new ones, I'm not sure if everybody has a question on the carryovers.
Questions on the carryovers? Nope, I
Okay.
think we've discussed those.
Yeah.
So I think we're good with them.
Okay, Madam Mayor, so this year, the first one would be out of the asset management plan would be Water Street. And we did touch on this at last year's budget because we did put the engineering in for 2023. That is looking to be that we'll finish that engineering up before the end of the year, and we'll be able to go to tender in 2024 for construction. I would say though, that is a schedule that's up to council. If council decides to move forward with a construction project, that would be one that's out of the asset management plan. The reason, I'll just kind of review it. The reason why water was at the top of the list was basically two reasons. One, the road itself is in need of some repair, repaving, but two, the water main that feeds Water Street actually comes through an old easement that we no longer own. So we have to put the new water main into road allowance and then upgrade the water main going down Water Street. So that was the reason behind that construction, the two items, road upgrades and water main upgrades. Sewer is fine, stormwater is fine on that street. So it would be a water-based project and a road construction project. A second project that I put up on the budget this year is a culvert that is on Fallon Drive. This is a large cement culvert that is actually on the Elginfield drain. It is close to the intersection of Stonehouse and Fallon. It was identified through our bridge inspection for replacement in the next 5 years. There's a lot of deterioration, undercutting of the footings and such, so that Spreett's recommendation was within the next 5 years to replace that. I put in engineering this year with replacement in 2025. And again, we can do another inspection. Once we have the engineering in place, we can do another inspection and determine exactly which year that project should go ahead. It's not whether it should, it's whether when. So I just wanted council to be, we just want to be organized for that one. The second or third project I have on deck is this is the Cunningham culvert. It's a cement culvert on Coursey Line. It's situated between Mooresville and Adair. It's actually part of the Cunningham Municipal Drain. And what we have there is it's currently a cement culvert, but it's extremely narrow. And so even though I have this on the list as a replacement, it's not because there's a deterioration in the culvert itself. It's because that the road, there's a hazard in the travel portion of the road because of the narrowness of the culvert. At the current moment, we've actually have installed wooden boards to hold the road up so that the road doesn't start falling into the side of the ditch. So there is signs that at some point this is going to have to be addressed. So there is other options to replacing this. I did have Spreett's look at it and give me different options available. The upgrade to the Cunningham drain, the culvert itself would be about $30,000. And then there would be obviously some engineering to organize the project, and there would need to be some road work, ditches, build up the shoulders through there. If we were to do different options, a lot of that road work is going to be spent will be spent also. So we may be able to come up with a slightly cheaper option, but we're going to end up with, we'll end up with signage and a narrow strip in there anyways. And on Corsi, our road counts, although not extremely high, certainly are higher than most of our roads, in the township. So I would look at that, but I just wanted council to know that that's due to road safety rather than deterioration of the culvert itself. Some of that, it would be nice, Madam Mayor, and we used to be able to do a little tour around and see some of these that we're talking about. And I would highly recommend if anybody's out and they go past the Corsi to stop and take a look at what I'm describing, because I'm pretty sure my description is not doing it justice if you took a look at it. Sainsbury line is the fourth project I have, and this one came up and it's a joint project with the county. We have had a couple of letters and a couple of inquiries about road safety on Sainsbury. And the safety factor is from basically Market Street, where our sidewalks currently end, and go north to Gilmore. There's a lot of joggers, a lot of bicyclers, a lot of pedestrians. In fact, if you want to say, they even go to Fallon to access Fallon up there. So in that, I did contact the county because they are paving the rest of Sainsbury next year. And part of that is there is a bicycle, county bicycle program, and Sainsbury is planned to be widened from Gilmore to Fallon now. It is not going to be widened from Fallon to Market. So that's where we would be looking at. If we did want to have paved shoulders, we could work with the county on widening out Sainsbury with a paved shoulder from Market Street to Gilmore, whereas they'll take it from Gilmore to Fallon. The actual biking system actually goes down Gilmore, and I believe it's Beach Street, and they access the downtown core through our streets rather than Sainsbury. So that's part of the safety feature of that, is we can put on a paved shoulder. The paved shoulder itself would probably be around $80,000. And that's both sides of Sainsbury from Market Street to Fallon. And that would be our portion of the widening. The other 300,000 I have in there, and part of this is the safety factor, and it comes down to safety factor, speeds, being in town, and that's street lighting. If we wanted to install street lighting out, it would be, and I should clarify that because I'm getting ahead of myself. Street lighting out to Gilmore only. Okay, so that we would be able to loop Gilmore into the town on a widened shoulder with street lighting. The street lighting itself would be, and again, this is just an estimate because we'd have to do, some investigation, because there is some street lighting on that stretch. It's just not adequate to what we would put in. So it would be approximately 300,000 for street lighting. In this, and I know that's a lot of money, in this project, it can be broken out into obviously the two factors. We can look at widening the shoulders with the county next year, and then keep looking at when we want to trigger the streetlights. So that is an option for council, that we don't have to do everything all at once. The streetlights would be installed in the ditches. They wouldn't be that we would be tearing up Sainsbury to install that. It would go along the west side where the poles are now, and see what additional lights could go on. So that would be, and I know there was some inquiries about how we can improve that safety factor in that stretch. So that's why I brought that project forward. Okay.
Councillor Westman, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. I think this is great. The paved shoulders is a great option. One thing I continue to be concerned about is pedestrian safety along Sainsbury in the areas where we don't have sidewalks. There's a lot of pedestrians walking on the road. At night too, we don't have street lights down the entire stretch there where there's residential properties. So what I'm seeing is people wearing dark colors, walking with their back to traffic and things like that. I think this is all great, you know, infrastructure is great, but we need to do some public education to make sure that we're reaching all, you know, it's one thing to build the infrastructure, but I want to make sure that we're reaching out and letting people know the proper usage. Because again, I've driven there 1,000 times, and it's scary when people wearing all black show up in your headlights and you're only a few feet away from them. So, you know, it's something we can do through social media or signage. I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
Okay, yep, thank you. Councillor Hodgins.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Jeff, is there I'm not sure if it's being discussed with the county, but like this is an improvement, paved shoulders for this stretch, where we've put in curbs and sidewalks. I guess it's improving that gap or that area from where we've done the sidewalk improvements to Gilmore. But is there a long-term plan for a more significant upgrade to that stretch? Like, are we considering adding sidewalks, you know, further to Councillor Westman's comments, for pedestrian safety? Because a paved shoulder is better and safer, but it's still, there's no physical barrier then for pedestrians. So is there a long-term plan for that stretch?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hodgins. That's a great question, and I should have probably brought that up. It is in our plan to urbanize from Market to Gilmore. Depending on how development does come into play on Sainsbury, and when that'll be triggered, would have a lot to do with the urbanization of Gilmore or of Sainsbury. We are, I shouldn't speak out of it, but it was in the DCs that we do collect for that urbanization, and we'll continue to do that. The biggest thing that we have is, you know, we have a lot of pressure on the DCs right now. And so when that urbanization could be triggered, I don't have a real clear picture on that. And that would be open for discussion. It would probably end up being a project we'd have to borrow of some sort to urbanize it, because there'd be a large investment in the stormwater for the curb and gutters and that sort of thing. That would be that would drive that project a lot higher than what it is in this case. Having said that, also too, when we go to do street lighting, and this is very similar to what we're doing across on Main Street, is the idea is to plan street lighting that is that can be used for the future. Because once we put the conduit and the lighting structures in, as long as it's designed and engineered properly, that's an investment for the future. So we don't have to rip that out. That actually is part of the urbanization for later on. So that's a really good point, because if we're going to make this sort of investment, we want to know we've got some long-term and, you know, investment there. So the street lighting would be part of that. Even though it's a big number, it's something that we would be putting in someday anyways. And I think it would be a discussion there that we could at least use that as a DC, because it is an upgrade for growth. I'm sure that we could be probably looking at part of that 300,000 as a growth DC revenue source. The widening of the shoulders, however, would not, you know, because we'd end up tearing up most of the road for storm and widening and that sort of thing. So that would be the kind of the short-term investment, would be the widening of the shoulders. But again, it's not the large portion of what we're talking about in that project.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for all that additional commentary. I think it's good to hear that, it's not as much throwaway costs as we might think, and that it can be planned, for that future urbanization, because yeah, the developments could slow down and maybe we don't see that growth in that area, that would trigger those larger improvements, but I think it's a good project to focus on, just for pedestrian safety. We've certainly heard this from residents in the area, so I think it's a good project. Thanks.
The fifth one I have down for Public Works for discussion is a guardrail or a guide rail installation. We have a bridge on Coursey Line just north of Fallon. It's on a paved section of road. It's probably one of our, if it's not our largest bridge, it's right up there as our largest bridge. It's not protected. It's in abutments have no protection as it stands now. And you come onto it from the north going downhill. And if you're coming from the south, you come up on it on a hill. It's one of the recommendations, again, when Spreetz does our bridge inspection, that they highly recommend due to safety of the road to install guardrail on that bridge. So I did include it for a discussion with council, that if we did want to start looking at some guardrail in appropriate areas for improving safety to our rural roads, this is really the number one place I would look at for doing that. And I think I've mentioned this before, guardrail is, it's pretty basic around Ontario. It protects your bridges from when they get hit, but it also tries to divert the traffic and keeps the traffic from going down into the ravine. And in this case, it is quite deep along this area. So I think it's a good project to consider. And it's open for discussion with council. Again, it's a good one to be on a road tour and stop and actually see how far down the ravine there it is at the Coursey Bridge there. So this next one is a sidewalk upgrades. And some of this is part of comments that I received through the budget survey, as well as comments in the public. As I get emails and calls, and even from counselors have asked about the condition of some of our older sidewalks and the narrowness of them. In particular, I would give an example like a William Street, a Wellington, some of these older sections that, yeah, the sidewalk is still okay, but it really is showing signs that is very narrow. There is some accessibility issues. If you were to travel William Street in a wheelchair, I'm sure you would be, it'd be an interesting go. So I did include that. Again, I wasn't able to ideally say I'm going to do block A to block B for $70,000. I put a number in there based on what we've done across the road and what we can do in other areas. You certainly can get a better deal if we do large sections rather than little chunks on the replacement program that we do through town. So it's just up there for council's consideration that we could start looking at upgrading some of those older sidewalks.
Jeff, do you know, is there ever any money out there for this sort of accessibility project, like beyond OCIF or the building fund? Like, I often see grants, but they're more for, buildings, kind of the fun stuff, right? But just wondered if there was anything out there if you're going to put an accessibility lens on the project.
I certainly can look into, Madam Mayor. Again, you're exactly right. A lot of the grants that I've seen do talk about more about the fun stuff, accessibility into actually properties and buildings and that sort of thing. But I certainly can look into it. I'm not aware of any grants that are currently out there for sidewalk. And a lot of it, again, a lot of, funding that is not fund funding. Public Works just seems to, it's got to be replaced at some point. So why would we fund something that gets replaced on a regular basis? So, but I certainly can look into it.
No, and that doesn't surprise me, and I wouldn't spend a lot of time on it, but I guess that's a conversation to have when people are looking for budget ideas, right? The higher levels of government, if they want your communities to be more accessible and either whether it's because of aids that you need to get around, or just to make them more walkable, right?
I did include, and this comes from a conversation I had with staff, the Public Works, at the Public Workshop where the green waste it is pretty tight with the amount of volumes we're getting in. And they've requested that we extend the pavement back enough that we can actually drive in and drive out a little easier with the green waste at the Public Works garage. So that's the why that we're expanding that. Also for consideration for council, I did put in, just so that we keep aware of projects and what's going on, because we just said a lot, obviously, but also too, we got to keep looking what the future's got in store for us also. And if we look at the asset management plan, Nicoline Ave, again, it falls as after Water Street. It would be the logical choice, or not logical, it is identified as the next project. And that's due to the deterioration of the road. And again, water main, that's one of our older sections of water main on Nicoline. I don't have a number. I would suggest, again, we always start with the engineering 1 year and we move to construction, or we can move to construction the following year. If council wanted to keep to the program, we could do engineering in 2024 with construction in 2025. A couple of these projects I'm dealing, getting estimates on. This one, I don't have an estimate on it. Currently we're doing some investigation on where the water main goes from ductile iron to PVC there. So I don't have the exact limits of where the water main is going to be replaced. There's a little bit of confusion around Kleinfeld. Where that is. So I'm still working on amounts or what that would cost to do. The other one I wanted just to bring up is the extension of sidewalks, because this is a pretty big topic in town, is the extension of sidewalks to the south. And that would be from basically Saintsbury intersection out to Old Clover. If there is still a project on the books to be built in the Old Clover subdivision, that would be a 4-story, correct, Ron, a 4-story building that would all of a sudden trigger, why don't we have sidewalks to Old Clover? So I put in here, because that section of road doesn't have a lot of storm, well, it has no storm in it. It doesn't not have sanitary in it yet. And it is dealing with some older water main in the area. So I do not have a real vision of what's needed on that section of road. So I'm recommending to council, if we truly want to put a plan together for that section of road, we should do a report, or bring a report to council on what's needed in that section of road and what can be done. Part of the planning of that process is it's MTO. It's Highway 4. It is not a township road. So we would have to deal with the MTO. We would have to have all our engineering and everything in place to MTO, to what MTO expects. And we all remember how the the traffic lights went, which is a great project, and it turned out great. But it's certainly, you got to be prepared when you start that project. It doesn't happen quickly. So that's why I bring that one up. And that would be the.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Jeff. just on that one, I mean, we've talked about it, but about having discussions with MTO about extending the connecting link. Didn't know if there's been any background on that or where we are, but if we're not anywhere, maybe we should start having.
Madam Mayor, and again, that was one of the things I did talk to Ron about, is I think if we did bring forward, or if council did want us to start investigating this, I think one of the first things we should do is have a discussion with the MTO on extending the connecting link. See where they sit on that. And I think that would be part of this, if we want to start putting a plan together, is have that discussion with the MTO and see whether they're even interested, or what would be involved with extending the connecting link. But yeah, I agree totally that has to be determined.
And were there any development charges collected for that urbanization or no?
Yeah, it is in the DCs to extend the sidewalks to the south. So when we did update the DCs, that is part of it. Yeah.
And if I may, Madam Mayor, just a couple of comments. This might be a perfect request for a delegation during Good Roads, Roma, those kinds of things, just to get the talks started. This is not going to be a short conversation with the MTO. It's going to take a while to work through those wrinkles. The other item Jeff mentioned was that there's no sanitary sewer there, and we've had numerous residents along that stretch at different times come to us and say, are we going to do anything with the sanitary? Because my septic system is failing. I have to do something, or I want a pool and I can't have a pool because that's where my tile bed is. And the problem is trying to get everybody on the same schedule. It doesn't happen. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge with scheduling, because it's going to have to be driven by the municipality, I think, and just bite the bullet and go. Because it's got to be done. I think everybody agrees it has to be done, but you're not going to get us to a point in time where all those people are going to be on board, because somebody might have just replaced their tile bed 2 years ago. They've spent $30,000 or $40,000. They're not going to want it. They're not going to want it. But again, at some point you gotta throw your hat over the fence and go. So that's going to be another major issue, and it's going to be a challenge for sure. But again, we have to start now, I think, and Jeff's right. I think we start to have conversations with the MTO, let them know we're interested, warm them up to it, and it's, work towards that goal.
Jeff, I was just wondering, and I might be totally wrong on this, but the water towers, that area urbanizes, and the collection of the water and people pulling it. Is there any upgrades needed in that area for traffic? Or are we thinking of moving the metering of water, or is it all good and I'm just not thinking correctly?
So, and through the mayor, so I'm just making sure I get what you're asking as the correct. So on Scotts Drive, we have the water tower. Are you asking whether we're going to shift the bulk water station, or
Was there ever talk of that?
We've discussed that internally,
Right.
for sure.
And if
Yeah.
we're not going to, was there any infrastructure or road work or anything that needed to be done? That's my question.
Yeah, so Queen Street, Scotts Drive is actually in the DCs for upgrades. So when we know that Asabo Fields is finished or close to finishing their construction, there's a small piece of gravel road from William to Asabo Fields, and we'll look at paving and upgrading that road. No decision on whether that should be urbanized or just paved and to allow a paved road to connect. And then the discussion then would be, at what point do we trigger Scotts Drive from Asaba Fields out to Main Street? And we don't have a time limit on that one. I can see us upgrading from Scotts Drive to William in the near future, when we know Asaba Fields has is getting close to being done, but the other one is still open for discussion on opening up the open road allowance. So that.
Okay, were there any other questions on the projects that Jeff has highlighted? Counselor Hodgins?
Just further to Ron's comments there, I think I agree. I think should maybe get that process started with MTO. Maybe, we're looking for some new delegation topics, and maybe that's one, like I'm sure MTO, people walking on the sides of their streets. I'm not sure if they're going to provide funding to this project or support it, but should probably at least start the conversation.
I think the delegations are for Roma, they're still open, aren't they? We should probably, that wouldn't be a hard one to put a request in for. Any other questions for the projects that Jeff has listed? So I guess just, are all of these until for consideration, those are all the ones that you want to go ahead with this year? Or is there any that you could put off?
Definitely, Madam Mayor, the ones for consideration. I want to make sure is on everybody's radar. So that's an easy one. And then the rest, I put up on there for, because some of this comes down to council's direction on what they view as where they see some of these projects and supporting some, the timeline on them. The importance of the timeline then becomes a council decision. I have no doubt all these projects will get done at some point. I think they're all very important. I would love to do them all. But at the same time, I think we have to be, we recognize that we have to keep to a schedule. And I don't think there isn't a project that I have put on here that, whether it's delayed a year, then I don't think will affect the project, but we just got to make sure we keep moving forward. So even for something like Water Street, where we have the engineering done, if we want to say to ourselves, no, we want to hold off on Water Street for a year, it certainly would not disrupt Water Street for one more year. It just falls, everything just kind of backs up a little bit. That's all.
With that Water Street one, because in your consideration list, then you've got Nicoline that you say automatically would follow that. Would there be thought to do the engineering for Nicoline and then do the construction of both of them together, or is it too much? Would that be too big a project to do both of them together?
I would recommend not doing them together, and the reason being that we collect capital levy charges for the water replacement. And not that we have issues, or I'm not worried about our water capital, but it's nice to do it on a basis where we collect as we go. So we're keeping up with things.
Okay, nope, thanks for that. Right, any other, yeah, Councillor Hodgins?
Just continuing on this conversation, I think if we're wrapping up the engineering for Water Street in 2023 and we can be ready for 2024 construction, I would think it would be good just to go ahead. Things just get more expensive as time goes on, and it's not like we're swamped with capital projects in 2024. It looks like right now for construction. Like we know we have some larger capital projects on the horizon. So I think if we're able to hit that 2024 timeline for Water Street, I would think my comment would be, let's go for it.
Thank you. Hey, any more on the roads? Or we'll move on to Parks and Rec. Okay, Jeff, or Catherine, did you have anything to?
Yeah,
jump
I'll
in?
start the
Okay.
conversation, but I just wanted to make a comment on the roads project. So on the reserve schedule, I did include, unless otherwise noted in the presentation, that they're coming out of the road construction reserve. But as alluded to, some of these are part of DC. So if there is some money there, we can use that as we collect it, or replenish the reserve as we collect it. And also we'll look to use the the CCBF and OCIF where it makes sense to do so within those programs. Depending on the project, they're specific to certain kinds of projects.
Just maybe, I should have maybe asked earlier, are we spending OCIF and the gas tax one as we're getting it, or do we have a bit of a saving, like, have we saved any of that? Built it up again?
Typically, the OCIF we have used each year in full. And then those projects, sometimes they're like, you can use have the same kind of project and use both funds. So we always use OCF first and we save the gas tax. And so there is a little bit of carryover that we've had left over from other projects if they've come in under tender or under cost. So we do have a little bit of money there. I didn't extend, there's another whole section to my reserve summary that talks about those obligatory reserves. So there is a little bit left that's carried over. So yeah, and then we could save it for 5 funding years for those ones, but I don't know what the new agreement for the gas tax looks like yet. But there's some there, but OCF, we don't have any carryover, but there is some gas tax sitting there.
Okay, because I guess that's what I was just saying, like typically we spend it. So I'm just thinking, is there something that we see that if we can save it for 5 years, we get bigger bang, but maybe we're not. If we're only collecting 300,000 a year, then I mean, that's easily spent.
That's true. So we look at opportunities and look at what projects are allowed in those programs and see where they can be best used. If we want to save for a bigger project, we have to borrow less. If something comes up that's large on the horizon, or if it makes sense to use it now or like that, otherwise using reserves. So reserves just not be used, then we could save it.
Just so we're talking about how construction, so when we do a construction like Water Street, and I talk about a large component of it is the water. So we will use the capital levy that we're collecting through that. There is when I say the sanitary is in good shape and the storm's in good shape, these are all things that will not take away from the budget if we talk about expansion of the water or the wastewater plant and those sort of things. So Catherine, she does keep things very precise in what we do. So when we talk about a rebuild of water on the roadside, we're talking sidewalks and curbs and gutters. So a large portion of it ends up being the water main is the reason why we're triggering a large investment. So it by the time you break out the funding that we get versus some of the reserves that we do collect for these projects, it works out. It's a pretty good plan that's in place.
Okay, so we'll move on to Parks and Rec. I'm just going to go over the projects that we have in progress, the carryover projects. Of course, we have the soccer field complex that's ongoing. And hopefully we have construction done to use at least majority of those fields in 2024. Then we have to run the hydro service as part of that project too. And the proposed building to go on that complex is still be decided for future. But right now we're focusing on getting the fields working. The playground in Spencer Park, we have the equipment and the plan is to install that in the spring, now that we've hit the winter season. The Granton Ballpark lights, that is the budget amount right now. That did go out to tender, and tenders were received recently and they're just being reviewed. And then that will start, once that's awarded, that can start over and be done over the course of the winter and be ready for next season, fall season. And then ongoing as well as the recreation master plan. That's in progress right now, but won't be completed before the end of the year. Any questions about the carryover ones or move forward? Okay, so
Any other questions? No. Okay.
sorry. Moving on, so the next section, I'm going to pass to Jeff to talk about a couple of those first projects.
So staff, we've received some quotes for the pool heater. It's come back between $30,000 to $40,000 with a new pool. It's a decision to decide whether we want a heater that's reliable, because the one we have is past its life cycle. Next up, the Granton Ballpark. We're asking for new fencing due to safety concerns. We have applied for a grant, but if it unsuccessful, we'd like to use reserves. And part of that grant is field improvements of $50,000. If we're not successful with the grant, we would like to probably postpone the rest of the infield. But that would include moving the fence out, and that's in the works with the new light standards that are to be done hopefully through the winter. Next up, we have the All Wheels Park, and staff was successful in getting $150,000 through a grant from the Ontario Trillium Fund. The remaining is to come from reserves, and that is in the Elm Street Park. Moving on, at the soccer field complex, we're looking at $40,000 worth of bleachers. That would include 2 bleachers for the premier field. And because of the grading around the premier field, we'd need to build that up. So that would include some armor stone and gravel fill. Also at the end of both premier fields, we're looking at protective netting. So this is netting that is 20 feet high by 65 feet wide, and one at each end of the premier field, and then the other 2 nets would be at the side of the lagoons on fields 1 and 2. Moving along, multi-purpose court extension. That was in the range of 25,000, and I know Catherine can speak to the report.
Yeah, I can take that one. I know that you didn't have as much information on that one, but there is a report included, so we can jump to review that. And this is just a follow-up report to an early report that was delivered in early October about the situation over at the multipurpose court. And so it was discussed at PRAC about what the other options were. And they also did research by talking to the contractor and the users to see what can be done. And of course, an option there would be do nothing and just leave it as. People are, it's happy it's there, but the users of pickleball mostly would like to see a correction done so that it's safer to use and more enjoyable for that group. And an option B would be to move forward, and PRAC discussed this at their meeting, and they would like to move forward with the alterations, and at the cost of about $25,000, and that can come from development charges. So if you remember, that project was funded from an ICIP grant, as well as development charges we could use because of it's developing parkland and new development. So we could just use money from that to fund the correction. So I think there's a recommended motion for that one up for discussion.
And did you want to put that to the side right now?
I saw the board talk to Jeff once you go past the.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Regan.
Madam Mayor, thank you very much. So Jeff, I'm just not with the soccer field complex, the bleachers and the protective netting and that sort of thing I'm understanding that premier field wouldn't be ready in 2024. So are those 2 things that we can push off to 2025?
Initial hopes were that it would be ready. Now it did get top dressed in that. The spring will tell a lot. If it is ready, do we want to be behind?
All right. Okay. No, just a question. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Jeff.
just on that. And so bleachers would be the way to go for the premier field. Like that's for a field like that, there's mostly bleachers for spectators.
Staff's understanding is, Madam Mayor, at most soccer complexes, the premier fields are the ones with the bleachers. Your other fields, typically parents are more likely to bring the lawn chairs.
Okay, yep.
Jeff, I want to answer my question there, but no, I agree with his comment. I want to, let's not use it if it's not usable, but let's get it ready fully to use in our budget next year and not be trying to get things ready. The field's ready and we're not ready on the outside. So yeah, I see what you're saying, proceed with that and then with the hopes of potentially using the field. So you answered my question, so thank you.
So we want to leave those other motions till later meeting. Okay. All right. So then the other report is regarding trails, and I think Jeff was going to speak to that as member of the Trails Committee.
So with the Trails Committee, it's been one of the bigger things that users have been asking for and why we've formed the Trails Connectivity and Advisory Committee. So in phase 1, we're looking at establishing connecting trail from Campanelli Storm Pond to the new Lucan Biddulph Soccer Complex. Consideration should be made regarding the material of this pathway. As a connecting trail to the Campanelli Storm Pond, the current material is a hard paved asphalt. Currently, winter maintenance is performed on this trail. Hardscape surfaces require less upkeep, however, can be more expensive initially, and repairs are required. A paved trail circuit of this size offers opportunity for community running events to utilize a safe space year round, such as the St. Patty's Day run, the color run, etc. To do gravel grading and dirt work, we're looking at $45,000. Asphalt paving on top would be $60,000, and then $15,000 is set for incidentals, or a total of $120,000. Depending on the ease of access to the surfaces for equipment, the price of paving can be reduced. Phase 2 would be connect the segmented trails pathways in the community through mapping and signage. Through discussions regarding signage will take place during the Parks and Recreation operating budget. Phase 2 should be partnered with economical development and branding plans. Through phase 3, depending on the establishment plan outline in phase 1, a discussion item in the 2025 budget for consideration will be the establishment of a chip and dust path along the Bend Drain shoulder. During the course of the wet seasons, until established, flagging would commence to outline safe and dry routes along the Bend Drain. Trailhead signage must be developed to comply with AODA standards at identifying the material of the path and difficulty of slopes. So initial talks have happened with the private landowner and the Conservation Authority. If this was to move forward, these discussions would have to be put on an agreement on paper.
That's for phase 3, right? Or does phase 1, does that enter into private land as well?
I believe phase 1 does cover over some of the private land as well.
Any questions on the trail 1, or do we want to hold off on that to discuss a bit later? The trail, yeah, Deputy Mayor.
So on the private property, would that be like a kind of a insurance agreement that if anyone gets hurt and kind of use of the land for 25 or 50 years, is that kind of?
So through the mayor to the deputy mayor, yes, that's correct. There would have to be some sort of use agreement. We would have to save harmless the private landowner from any possible claims. So yeah, there's a bit of work that would have to be done there. And yeah, my concern would be we don't want to do it twice. So that strip of land that's private, that's currently private, we know that ultimately that will get developed. When is the question? So any construction that happens on there, is that gonna impact the walkway? So there's a lot of talks that have to happen there. Because that land slopes off quite dramatically. You know, if you look on the aerial photo, there's a line of trees there that I assume the land that lies to the east of the trees is developable, and the line from the trees down to the drain is not developable. But that drops off quite dramatically. So there would have to be some sort of determination of where that actual walkway will be, because we can't have a walkway under 3 feet of water in the spring or anything else. So it's got to be up high. So there's a lot of work to be done yet on that. But maybe that's, maybe that stretch, we have to leave until sort of the end. Maybe we can do the stuff on the soccer field first with, sort of prep it so that once that construction is done, we can finish it.
Next,
No, just a sec, check. Counselor Hodgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I like these ideas, and it's great that the new committees, coming up with some great ideas and proposals. I think there's a lot of maybe details to be sorted out, but I like the concepts, and I think it's good to think about, what we want to allocate, whether it is a particular reserve or if we can, I'm comfortable with like committing funds towards trails and developing that reserve and having it ready. I think there's maybe still some details to be worked out through this these proposals as shown in the report, the phased approach. And then we're going through our Parks and Recreation Master Plan right now too. So I'm interested in, I guess, how these concepts and our vision for our trails can get integrated into that plan, and how that can be considered, and leveraging those consultants while we have them doing this master plan. But one question to staff would be, is the timing for these projects then 2024, or is this phased over years, or do we have timing established, or are we still quite preliminary? Sorry for the flurry, just I guess, do we have timing for these projects?
So, Madam Mayor, if I may, I think this is sort of the overall picture, and I think once we get down to brass tacks, there's nothing to say we can't move trails to 2025, for example, or there's some more that are coming up yet that we could possibly look at shuffling around. So I think that the order in which they're going to be completed or will be completed is still to be determined, but that, I think we're throwing everything on the desk for the council to have a look at. And then when we get further down the road with the budget, you can sort of pick and choose which ones do you do first and which ones fit with our budget. Does that make sense?
Good with that, Counselor Hutchins? All right, Jeff?
so the next item is the YMCA daycare floor replacement. The floor that's in there is in some pretty bad disrepair. Initial estimate came in at $45,000.
Through Madam Mayor. So this would be a prime example. It makes more sense to do it all at once, but if the budget gets tight, we could split it over 2 years. So that's the kind of thing we could look at. Obviously, it's much more efficient to do it all at once, but it being the YMCA and in current operation, that type of a project may lend itself to phase.
The next item is the Scout Hall roof replacement. Now there'll be a bit of a discussion on this. We've had a couple prices come in. One is option A for a complete replacement of $25,000. And the second one would be option B to replace just the screws and washers of the steel. So staff has had some complaints of the ceiling needing repair. Staff's recommendation is let's fix the problem before we repair the same problem. The building itself was built in 1984. And conversations will have to be had because the asset management plan has it coming up in 2025. And so the initial screws were not in the right spot. They were in a valley instead of on a rib. So the first quote we got with the option of replacing just screws and washer, there's no warranty or anything with that price. For the $25,000, that's a complete new roof with warranty.
Okay, are there any comments at this point on that? Okay. Yeah, Councillor Westman?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. I mean, I'm familiar with the building very well and the water damage that's happening inside. So, but when we did, like I went out and had a look at it myself and I was a little surprised to see where the screws were placed. I don't know how you would fix that and make it even last 5 years if they plugged the holes and put the screws in the proper location. I don't know that they could last even a few years that way. So we'd be back in the same boat in just a few years. So.
And this is, if you to replace the roof, this would be the first time it's being replaced since it was built? Yeah.
I can do the next one. Yeah. So we have, at the community center. Sorry. At the community center, when we built it, we put in the infrastructure needed to facilitate electric vehicle charging stations. And we've been looking at, there's a couple of grants out there. I know one I think there's some other types of ones floating around. So we're just trying to lock those in. I don't have a lot of the information, but staff is working on it. I know one that is due for an application-based one is due the end of January with 75% of the project costs covered at the grant. So if we put in what's listed here with the, I don't know, it's technical, level 2 and level 3 type chargers, we'd have 2 posts and one post has 2 chargers on it. So this would be the cost to outfit 2 posts with 2 level 2s and 2 level 3s on the other post. Like one of the grants we're looking into required you had at least 1 level 3 in order to qualify. And then these stations would generate revenue for the township, as it wouldn't be a free charge. You would have to pay in some fashion. What that looks like or what that costs, we don't know, but we could recoup if we were successful with the other grant, we would recoup some of that cost. But if we decide we want to go forward anyway to do that, if you want to put an electric vehicle in, we have some opportunity to recoup some costs with the cost to charge your vehicle. If Ron has more to add to that conversation.
I was just gonna say, I think, you know, we've laid the groundwork to install this thing. I think the grant that Catherine talks about with the 75%, that's pretty attractive. So if the taxpayer only has to come up with 25%, and then we can set the rates for charging, I think it's, you know, I think it's a matter of doing the math, seeing what everybody else charges, or what everybody else charges to charge your electric vehicle, and what the payback period would be. So I think, I do think this is an attractive project for us at this time, because there is pretty attractive grant money out there for this kind of thing.
Any questions or comments on this one at this time? Yeah, the grant money certainly does make it attractive to do it. And yeah.
I agree if successful on the grant, and if not successful, I'd probably have a comment.
Do we know how many, like I know the wellness center has them. Do we know in our neighboring communities how many have on public lands charging stations? I don't think there's any in North Mid, is there? Oh, at the office. I think that they're putting them in, I think. Well, they do have them at the, at Middlesex Centers because their whole fleet has gone electric, right? But they probably don't maybe allow them. I don't know.
Yeah, they have them at the wellness center.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many they have at the wellness center, but there's some at the wellness center and I believe there's some at the municipal office
Yeah.
as well.
Is it only, sorry, Catherine, is it only one grant you're looking at, or like the, obviously the one that is the 75% we hope is that would be the successful one. But are there other grants that are being explored as well? Or
I think there might be opportunities I've seen come across, but sorry, I'm not as close to that as I like to be at this point in time, but we'll explore, do that research and see what's available, but it's definitely the way of the future, I guess. The other project we have a grant for outdoor exercise equipment. It's apologize. The Canada Healthy Communities Initiative, and there is something we applied for a few years ago, and then we weren't granted it, and then they asked to reapply, so we reapplied, and then found out that we were awarded $30,000, and that's just putting some outdoor amenities like in relation to exercise throughout Lucan and in Granton, so probably along like in the parks, like something in Elm Street Park, something around the track. There's a little bit there. There's opportunity in Granton Park. They have a trail in there. Also, somehow there's maps and stuff that was submitted at the time through all the different parks on our land. So we would commence that, and that would have to be done by next September. And we would only buy stuff that would be within that $30,000 and wouldn't want to go over. But I don't have any pricing on what that equipment is at this time. But it's good news we have a grant and we can go forward with that. Otherwise, we probably may not. So.
Next item for consideration, it can be deferred to 2025 or later. Staff was looking at the possibilities of refinishing the floor and repainting lines in the gymnasium. And this would be in the neighborhood of $12,000. And also with that, we're looking at adding additional basketball nets to the sidewalls, and in hopes of increasing programming. We've had from current programmers tell us their wish for nets on the side, that they could be lower for more youth, for the younger ages. And then part of that would be adding a divided curtain. So then we could have two courts going at the same time. However, we have not looked at the pricing for the dividing curtain in great detail.
any questions on that one at this time? Okay, imagine we'll all come back to all of this stuff at some point. Okay, oh, you do?
Comment. I didn't question the line, but
Okay. Okay. You want to go ahead?
yeah, it's not about the dollar value. There's a lot of projects here that come with grants or that have been awarded grants. My comment is just on management and being able to successfully, I mean, everyone can take their scroller. It's amazing how many projects are here, and to go from a quote to successful completion of all these projects. I just find the volume of them quite high as opposed to the dollar value. And again, they've got a big facility to run. And then when I look at all these, I'm going, well, I think there's up to 15, 16 of them. If we pass the budget in February, and to manage again, this plus staff, plus expectations, plus any deficiencies of our big project, the arena that they got to work with, if they do have to work with the contractor on anything, any deficiencies at the soccer field. I just look at that and more, are we setting up for failure for solid, good completion of projects? And that's my comment. Not, I just think they're being overtaxed with this many, and I don't know how it got like this. but it's not the dollar value. So I want to extend on Councillor Hodgins' comment. So I guess one, the trails, I'm all in favor of the trails and putting it into reserves. But that's when I would, when I look at all these, when I look at 16 items to successfully complete and run a Parks and Rec department, that'd be one that I would want to hold off on and put into reserves and not have management even thinking about that. Charging stations is another one. You know, we can all say that's small, but you can say that about 16 of them. Again, just a great grant opportunity. Definitely that'd be one if we get the grant. It makes sense. But just a comment I wanted to make, it concerns me with this many projects to successfully complete them with everything else that they're working on to successfully complete.
Thank you for those comments. Any other comments at this time? Just wondered, was there any discussion on at the arena doing anything on the home side? Doing any improvements over there?
There has been some discussions. There's never been a dollar amount put to it, and it didn't get put into this year's budget.
Anything else? Okay, want to move on to the next slide. Maybe actually just back to the dividing curtain. I always thought that that was maybe a very cost prohibitive thing when we talked about dividing it off before. That always was something.
Madam Mayor, I was just gonna make the comment, we're still waiting for the dividing curtain on the new hall, so, yeah, I agree, number one, what would the cost be in delivery time too? Like it seems to be ridiculously long delivery time on these types of items, so.
In other conversations I've had, because that was one of my questions too. The dividing curtain wouldn't be the same as what's the dividing wall that's going in the multi-purpose hall. It would be something that's more like you could see through like mesh or something like this. It's not a wall where you can't see or hear through. It's just a matter of the equipment doesn't pass through in the other courts. It's more just a mesh or something of that nature. So nothing as prohibitive as a wall, unless that's what we wanted to go with. But for a gym, you wouldn't need that kind of thing.
I got the finger, so there we go. So the next slide here is possible revenue from surplus land disposal. When we've talked about this at council in the past, we do have it's a former unopened road allowance located on Nick Line between Saintsbury and Elm Street. It is 66 feet wide by, look at Jeff Little for a second here. I think it's 217 deep. It's a large, very large lot, and it sits amongst very large estate type lots. So we had talked about the fact that, there's a potential sale of property here because it will never be a road allowance. However, it does have a sanitary sewer line that currently runs along. It's probably not in the middle. It's probably offset a little bit, but we would have to move that sanitary to the edge of the property to make this a more viable and sellable lot. So there is potential revenue if council wishes to proceed with this. I would suggest, or staff has talked about us internally doing the looking after the moving of that sanitary sewer line. And I'm not saying that our forces would do it, but we would manage that project, and quite possibly we could whether you could auction off or sell it by tender or whatever purpose or whatever method you wish to dispose of that site. But I do get phone calls, and there is a list of people who are anxiously awaiting that. And I would suggest that that is still a very valuable lot, even in this economy, this climate. It's still an attractive lot for a lot of people. So again, it's an opportunity, I think, for council if they wish to take advantage of it. Yeah, it's on the floor for discussion.
Okay. Discussion, yep.
No, I think we should definitely proceed and get it saleable as if it's like as a service lot, fully serviced lot, so that it's geared to anybody that wants to bid on it, as opposed to more geared to, let's say, a a construction company that knows that type of business. That way it definitely would help us. And again, we are missing out on taxes every year on that too. I mean, that's the other thing we're gonna need to look at. So,
Councillor Regan.
So not in favor of selling it. I think we should be acquiring and keeping. I'm thinking about 10 years down the road where we could think about using that as something. And I understand, I mean, it's, valuable now, might be more valuable later, but I think it might be more valuable to something else 5-10 years down the road. So I wouldn't be in favor of selling that, no.
Any other comments? Councillor Hodgins?
I think I'm interested in, I guess, better understanding, I guess the cost associated with moving the sewer and maybe what we can expect to receive revenue wise if we were to sell this off. Not sure if the next step would be a report to council that we could then make a decision on, but I guess I'd be interested in seeing the information within that staff report to help us make that decision.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? I probably would agree with just getting a better understanding of the cost of it. But I'm more inclined on the side of selling it because just where the location is, I don't know what else we would do with it at this stage, but would be interested in knowing the cost to get it ready to sell. Okay.
So on my final slide, but you'll probably have noticed throughout the conversation, we didn't touch on the water and wastewater specific items. In this meeting, those will come down in the future once we have more information. And I think one of the biggest one was of course, the expansion of the Lucan wastewater treatment plant. But I think in discussions with staff, we suggested maybe having a special delegation from the engineer to update you on that project. Okay, so thank you, everyone. I thank staff for helping put together all this information and presenting, and there's a lot of information to take in, a lot of projects on the list, but as Deputy Mayor said, can we do them all? A lot of them are important, but they have to then now take it back and figure out what's doable. We want to be successful. So we'll take all those conversations into advisement. Imagine we'll maybe have further conversations with the finance committee, and as we go along through that operating budget, we can see what money may be available to fund some of these things as well. Because I just have in the reserve summary kind of our planned amount to contribution to reserves, but again, we have to go through the detailed operating budget to make those decisions. So right now, all the report was basically for information, other than the recommended motions and the reports, but that's just you can deal with that as you may. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Catherine, and to staff for putting all that together. I guess that was my question because we really haven't given any direction on much of this. And typically at this meeting, we do pick and choose projects. And I guess, is council comfortable with just accepting and staff to that point, I guess, and I would look to Jeff at this point, with just accepting this for information and having further discussion, because there is a lot on there. Are there any projects, Jeff, that you would like a yay or a nay on that you need to, come January or even December, get paperwork out so that we can ensure we can move ahead on these things in 2024?
Madam Mayor, no, I'm comfortable with not trying to pick and choose right away. I think there's room to say, as long as we keep the process moving. Particularly because in the past, it's particularly the public works projects, I've expanded some of them, or some of them are new to council. And I think it's worth giving a chance for questions or maybe more inquiries. Certainly some of the carryovers, I think, are basically, we've already talked those ones last year, but no, I don't see any that we need to get out in December. As long as we knew that we were moving ahead with a plan in January. Does that make sense? Yeah.
And I guess Water Street, you would still be a comfortable waiting a decision. I mean, I agree with when Councillor Hodgins' comments. I think the engineering's done. Let's just keep that ball rolling. In my mind, that would be one project I would be comfortable with. But as long as you feel, as long as there's nothing else that we're holding you up on.
I'd like to be able to come back with council because in that Water Street one, I wasn't able to provide a cost estimate for next year. So I'm thinking, I'll have that by the end of the week. We were trying really hard to have it for tonight, but there's some things on Water Street that we just have to make sure we nail down for council. And so I don't, as much as I think that falls in line with our asset management plan, until you have that cost brought forward, I think it's better to, get that information.
Questions or comments from council on how do you want to discuss any more of these at greater detail? Do you just want to receive for information? Councillor Regan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering, with a couple of projects that we've received grants for, like the All Wheels Park, and I'm just wondering if we need to move forward on that, if it's time sensitive, if we have to begin working on that. Is there an expiry date? I'm just wondering if there's any projects that we have that we've got grants for that we need to move on sooner than later. Just a question. Thank you.
So the grant for the exercise equipment, I think that's before September of next year. The Ontario Trillium Fund has to be done. We gave them our project timeline would be done next year for the All Wheels Park. So that's those things we have to do. Definitely we review if the grants, if there's what the timelines are, but usually are within the year, but some are longer. I don't have those particulars at this time.
I would, and in that case, I would be okay with just accepting this for information at this time. So, thank you.
Any other comments at this point? I guess I'm going back to but this could be a discussion that comes back, is just on because I don't think that there was necessarily a big wait just for the pickup truck on the Parks and Rec pickup one. If we could maybe hold that off maybe for a year, if staff feels that it's still in good shape, we've just invested in new brakes, could we hold off on the purchase on that one? Okay, then I guess what I would do at this point is just accept this, ask for a motion to receive the capital budget planning presentation for information, with the expectation that there'll be further discussions on these that have been presented. Okay. Councillor Regan and Councillor Hodgins, all in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to the staff reports, we did highlight the two of them, but we'll start with the trails one. The multi-purpose court allocation alterations. And what have I done here? There is a recommended motion on that one, but did council want to speak to that report in greater depth on the multi-purpose courts? Councillor Hodgins, then the deputy mayor.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just, I guess, trying to, I guess, fully understand the safety concerns that the users of the pickleball courts are having. The issue is with the lack of space between the court and the fencing. It seems like we received these complaints or these concerns. It was discussed at committee. Staff are bringing forward this recommendation that was adopted by the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. But we do feel like, this is necessary. It's not like we're just getting a few complaints. Like, is it pretty, are we sure that we need to make these improvements, or are we really putting ourselves at risk if we, put this off for a bit? Just recognizing that, the courts were just built, and I want reassurance from staff that this is really required.
So through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Hodgins. Yeah, I think right now we're kind of feeling like we didn't do the full job. Like we missed something here. The concrete pad should have been bigger to make it usable for the users. So it's like we've gone 90%. We just didn't do that extra 10%. So we need to do that extra 10% to have a product that is usable by the users, and that was our original goal. So.
Okay. And yeah, I guess it's a bit frustrating, I guess. And I'm sure, we see that at council, and I'm sure the users and everyone's kind of not pleased with the result. And, maybe it's just further to some of the comments made by the deputy mayor earlier is, having a lot of things on the go and trying to move things forward. I think this is one where we work directly with a contractor just to get it built, and maybe didn't have the full design, but okay. I'm I guess generally supportive of moving forward with that after hearing those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, basically what Councillor Hodgins said, but just I guess too, I mean, we're using the safety word on that. When I was there for the grand opening, I guess just a comment that the players had said to me was that was just, I'd never played pickleball, so they're sitting there trying to do their serve, and their back swings hitting the fence. So they were complaining during the picture. But I've never played before, but they were certainly showing me. So that's, we're throwing safety out there, which is maybe a concern, but I think ease of use and proper playing and exactly my comments earlier on the number of projects and properly finishing them. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So during as chair of the Pracket was discussed extensively, and there were a number of concerns that were brought up just from safety, from people falling in, and so the actual proper play was also one as well on top of the safety. So it was recommended, and it was unanimous at PRAC. Just again, committee was making that recommendation. So I just, having said all of that, I'm supportive of this recommendation of option B to move forward with the alterations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just so I'm clear though, like the courts are properly spec'd. It's just the apron around the courts on the pickleball. Is the tennis court properly spec'd?
If I can, Madam Mayor. The pickleball has specifics to the court, but nothing outside of the court. So that's where we ran into that issue. As for tennis, without having the exact measurements in front of me, we have not received any complaints regarding the tennis. And we did take measurements and compared them, but I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, and they do seem adequate.
Thank you for that. I guess on this one, I think we've invested in it, and not to have it, as the deputy mayor said, the pictures were being taken and they're being used for the first time, and there was issues. So I think we need to correct it going forward. So I would be okay with option B on that one. So if there's no other discussion, we do have then the motion in front of us. to receive the information and then accept PrAC's recommendation. So if council is comfortable moving forward, I would ask for a mover and a seconder on that one. Councillor Russman and Councillor Regan. All in favor? And that's carried. And the second one in front of us is the trails one. And we've already had some discussion on that. Did council want to reinforce any comments from earlier? I think at this time, I haven't weighed in. I would be comfortable, I think, setting up some sort of reserve, or whether we have to set up another reserve, or does it go into Parks and Rec, knowing that we put X amount of dollars in it, it goes to trails. I mean, the report and the phased in approach, I mean, we are much further ahead than we were 2 years ago on trails, and we've got a committee. So I'm really, I think we're making positive steps. To Councillor Hodgins' point, I would like to see what comes out of the rec plan and kind of go from there. But if we could think about, when it comes to budgeting, to actually putting dollars into budget, putting money into reserves, again, that shows a commitment that we're moving ahead with this. That would be, I think, at this point, I'm more comfortable than actually committing to this project at this time.
Madam Mayor, I would agree with your comments and the comments of the deputy mayor. At this point, you know, I know there's going to be people who are disappointed if it doesn't move forward, but how much can we do is the question. And is this the right time to move forward when there's still going to be construction on part of it? We're still moving, you know, we're still doing construction on the soccer field itself. So I would agree with the comments. And I know that there's going to be some disappointed people on the Trails Committee, but we can't do everything all at once. And that's the bottom line. We have to be strategic in what projects we move forward on.
And I think it can be disheartening, I'm sure, being on a committee and seeing that. So, we can say, oh, it's meshed in with the rest of the funds, but maybe setting up a separate column and truly pulling it out, earmarking it to that we are serious about it, and that it's we like what we see, and just moving forward to do it again properly. And the comments made about the private land, and just, anyways, the first step will be a separate line or separate reserve. But I like that idea, just especially with it being a committee. They did well with their 2,000 we gave them last year. So.
Okay, any other comments on that? I mean, certainly that doesn't preclude having a formal discussion with the landowner or anything like that, starting to move forward and things like that, right? So there is a recommended motion to receive the report for information and accept the recommendation. I would look to council to maybe reword that to receive for information, and just leave it at that at this point, and we can talk about reserve funds at the next stage of budget. Councillor Hodgins?
I'll move a motion to amend the motion to receive the report for information.
Okay, so just to receive. And Councillor Regan, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. All right. With that in mind, thank you very much for your time tonight. And good discussion. And there was a lot of information, and I would encourage you to go home and digest it again. Any questions, as our staff has indicated, they're open to have those conversations, and we'll certainly look forward to speaking about some of these projects as we get deeper into the budget cycle. With that in mind, I would ask for a mover and a seconder for the confirming bylaw, which is bylaw 53-2023, that if no one cares to speak to this bylaw on its first, second, and third reading, that it be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, read a third time and passed. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Regan and Deputy Mayor Manders. All in favor? And that's carried. And to adjourn our meeting at 6:25, a mover and a seconder, Counselor Regan and Counselor Hodgins. All in favor?